this is Sai Kumar Kortiwada. In this video, we will learn about hasOwnProperty of an object in JavaScript. Let us understand what is hasOwnProperty. HasOwnProperty is a method which will be returning true or false based on the property existence inside that particular object. If the property exists in that object, it will return true, else it will return false. To understand more about hasOwnProperty, let me quickly jump into Visual Studio. Here I have created index.html and JS file. This JS file is embedded into my HTML via script tag. So now whatever I am writing in this index.html, I can console and I can see the output in this HTML file. So now let me create an object by using var obj is equal to object, and this object having a property called as age 10, and this object contains a property called as age 10. Now if you want to check this age property exists in that object, we can use hasOwnProperty over this object. So check age, and let me use obj.hasOwnProperty of which property I want to check. Pass that property name like age. Let me give semicolon and save this. If you see the output here, let me reload, and the age property exists and the value is true. It is returning true because this age property exists. Instead of age, let me give name. Let me save this and go back and reload. It is giving false. Why? Because this object does not contain a property called name. So let me revert back to age and save this and go back, reload. Here you got true. That is absolutely fine. And now what I'm doing is I'm just adding a property via dot operator like name is equal to Sai Kumar. And now if I want to check the property name, it exists in that object. So check name, comma, I want to check the name. So obj dot has one property of that particular property name, that is name, semicolon, go back and reload. If you see here, age exists and the name also exists. So whenever you are adding such properties to your object, even that will be treated as own property of that object. Now we'll see about the second approach of creating an object. So let me create const obj2 is equal to, we can create an object via object.create method. So I can pass the existing object to this and I can create a new object. Let me pass obj. Now this obj2 will be having the properties of age and name, as well as I'm adding something called as obj2 with a square braces, and I'm adding address equal to Hyderabad. So now let me console these values, console.log of. Let me check the address first. Check address, and here obj dot has own property of, I want to check address. Let me give semicolon, save this, reload. Check the address is false. Why? Because we are checking on obj1. So now let me replace this obj1 with obj2, save this and go back, reload. So you got true. So the address value or the property exists on obj2. But if you try to check the property which is like obj, that means check age on obj2. So I'm checking obj2 dot has one property of, I want to check the age property because it has been created over the obj. And now if you go back and clear it off, reload, you will be getting check object on obj2 is false. Why we are getting false? Let me check whether that obj2 contains the age property or not. Obj2 comma obj2. So give semicolon and reload. Now you get address property, and the remaining properties are inside the prototyped object. So whenever your object contains a prototyped values, then that properties will not be treated as own property. That is the reason we are getting age as false, because they are not the own properties of this obj2. They are created by inheriting these properties. So prototype is something where you are inheriting the existing object and creating a new object. So the object properties which are prototyped properties will not be treated as has own property. That is the reason we are not getting age. Even if you try with the name, it will also give false. Let me reload this and you will be getting false. Why? Because it is also a prototyped object property. Now we understood one thing is object.create will have a prototyped object values, and that values will be not treated as a own property of the obj2. That means newly created object. Now what I want to do is I can create an object even with the functions. So let me try with the function sample function, and inside the sample function I'm writing this dot name is equal to Sai Kumar, and also one more thing like age colon or equal to 10. So I have two properties, and let me create an object. Let me say this as func object is equal to new sample. I created a sample object for this function, and now let me test this. Console.log of func object name property. So I want to check func object, that is object dot has own property of what I want to check. I want to check two properties. One is name and one is age. Let me give name and save this. Let me go back, clear it off, reload. So here if you see func object name property exists and it is returning true. Now what I want to do it, I want to console log of func object with age. So now func object dot has one property of, inside the quotes let me give age and semicolon, go back and reload, then you are getting false. Why? Because as in the previous discussions and previous videos we discussed about the function, and whenever you are creating a function, the properties which are having this will be acceptable inside that object, otherwise they will be in a ignored state. That is the reason it is not treated as a own property of that function. So to know about the function and the creation of different types of objects, please watch my previous video. I'll provide the link in the description. And also let me create a class sample, that means an object which is created by the class, and let me give name Sai Kumar, and also let me write console.log of class property with name. So I want to check this name property over the class. Let me create an object class obj is equal to new class sample. I'm creating an object for this class sample, and this class object can be used to check has one property of name semicolon, go back and reload. If you see here, class property with the name returns true. Okay, now these are the different ways to check our property existence over an object. And also I'll be showing some different type of adding a prototyped values to this function object. Func object obj dot underscore underscore proto underscore underscore dot address. So I'm trying to add the address into this, like Hyderabad semicolon. And now if you check this address value inside my hasOwn property, the value will return false. Console.log of func obj with address. Now I am checking the address property. Func obj dot has one property of address, so it will return false because it is a prototyped property of that particular object. Let me go back, clear it off and reload. So if you see, obj2 contains only the address and check address, and also here what we wrote function with address. So function with address is returning false. Why? Because that address is a prototyped object. And if you see the console of this object, console.log of func obj comma func obj. Let me save this. This is my second object. Let me clear it off and reload. If you see this object func object, you have the name property which is a own property, and whatever I have added the address, it is a prototyped property. So whenever you are adding a prototyped property, that will not be existing in your hasOwn property. In the same way, I can even show you on the class objects, class obj dot underscore underscore proto underscore underscore dot address. So I'm adding an address property via prototype into my class object, that is Hyderabad, and let me console this, console.log of class obj with address comma class obj dot has own property of address. So I'm giving address on this, and let me save this, clear it up, reload. If you see here, class object with the address is also returning false. Let me check that object first. So console dot log of class object comma class obj. So if you see this, in the class object you got one name which is a own property which is created inside the class itself, and address which is added via prototype. So whenever we are adding the prototyped object, they are something like inherited part which is not existing on the own properties of that particular object. Let me summarize this hasOwn property. hasOwn property is used to find whether that particular property exists in a object or not. And the second point is, whenever you have a prototyped properties, that will never be treated as a own property. hasOwn property will always return a boolean value, either true or false. If the property exists, it will return true, otherwise it will return false. And when the property does not exist on the object itself, hasOwn property will never throw an error. It will throw a value as false because that property does not exist on that particular object. One thing we missed in this video is whether I can find hasOwn property on an arrays. Yes, we can do that. So for example, I have an array with Sai, comma, Kumar, comma, Kurtiwada. This is my array and I want to find hasOwn property. So here, what is the property or the key we will be passing to find? Here, whenever you are creating an array is also a type of key pair values where the key will be the index value. That means 0 will indicate Sai, 1 will indicate Kumar, and 2 will indicate Kurtiwada. So now what I can do is arr comma arr dot has own property of 0. That means whether it contains the index 0 or not. Let me clear it off and reload. If you see here, it returned true, but when I try to pass something like 5 which does not exist, it always return false. So here it is returning false. Now what we understood from this example is, even we can use hasOwn property on an arrays, but here the key will be always an index value. That may be 0 to index, that means n minus 1, and whenever that index does not exist, it will return false. So this way we can use hasOwn properties on an object, on an create object, on a functional object, on a class object. So we saw all the different types of objects and its hasOwn property in this video. If you like my explanation, please like, share, subscribe to my channel for more updates. Signing off. Thank you.